So, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, From Data Chaos to Clarity. I'm Olti Haxia, and I'm a Workday solution architect. And today we're going to talk about how to clean, control, and secure your Workday data. We'll share some insights and lessons learned from our experience working with clients, and hopefully we can give you a practical framework that you can take away and you can apply within your organization. Now, let's be completely honest, right? So data isn't exactly the most exciting topic in the world, but it becomes the most important thing, I guess, that everyone cares about when we see something go wrong with data. And after all, we're at an age where AI is upon us and AI is here to stay. So all of a sudden, data has now become more important than ever before. Because regardless of the AI tools or AI agents that you plan to use or utilize, the output that comes out of those tools is only as good as the data that it's based on. Before we get going, just a couple of quick housekeeping points. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to post them in the Q&A. We will do our best to answer your questions throughout the webinar, but if we're not able to get to your question before the end, then we will make sure that we follow up with you separately to make sure that we get that answered. And secondly, this can't be a webinar on all things Workday without a safe harbor statement. So here is our product statement. Anything we mentioned today around any future Workday services or features is subject to change, and any decisions that you make should always be based on what's available in Workday today. Right, so with that out the way, I think let's do some introductions on who's going to be speaking today. So we'll start with myself. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Olti Haxia. I'm a Workday solution architect here at VirtualResource. I've been working in the Workday ecosystem for well over a decade now across functional, data, and technical work streams. Joining me today, we have Louise McBride, who's our HR transformation consultant. We've got Piotr Ogorzalek, who is a Workday security lead. And finally, Celise Carstens, who is a Workday data consultant. So here's what we're going to be talking about today. I'll start with a quick introduction on VirtualResource and who we are. Then we'll get into the problem statement and look at some of the challenges that we're seeing across organizations. We'll pause briefly for a short survey to get your perspective on what type of challenges are you facing. Then we'll walk through our framework and how we've applied that framework, working with various clients. We'll wrap up with a second survey and leave some time to spare for questions at the end. And guys, I want to call it out right from the start. We're also offering a limited number of free advisory consultant power hours that can help you on any topics or data challenges that you have today. And we'll give you more information around how you can engage with us and inquire about that before the webinar finishes. Cool. So I think let's do some introductions on VirtualResource. So here at VirtualResource, we are focused on end-to-end Workday solutions with a very strong emphasis on customer experience and automation. We are not a typical cookie cutter consultancy. We take a practical, delivery-first approach, very much focused on getting real value into your Workday tenant. A lot of our consultants come from client side, so they truly understand and know some of the pain points or challenges that you may be facing today. We support a wide range of industries and geographies. We've worked on complex programs with experienced consultants who have delivered large-scale Workday transformations. On this slide, we'll talk a little bit around our brands. So at a high level, VirtualResource operates as one partner with three distinct service brands. Each is designed to support organizations at different stages of their Workday journey. So VR Services focuses on core Workday delivery and ongoing support across HCM, finance, and AMS. Incubane, which is our sister company, is where we innovate, building Extend and AI-enabled solutions in Workday. They also have a number of built-on Workday apps that are available for you to purchase on the marketplace, which you can check them out. And then finally, VR Transformation Services, which focuses on broader transformation, helping organizations align, design, and embed change so the technology, in most cases Workday, actually delivers the value to the customer and to yourselves. So that's a little bit around us and our brands. So let's get into the problem. So regardless of how organizations engage us, we consistently and continuously see the same pattern. Most Workday tenants are functional, but not necessarily healthy. So on the surface, things might look fine. Everything looks fine. Payroll runs each month. Your business process is complete. Reports exist and they're used by end users. But when you look closer, control is often missing, which is where that hidden complexity comes in. We see things like security roles cloned again and again with no clear ownership. Security domains opened up temporarily but never closed, and inactive security groups that still are referenced across security domains, business processes, and reports. Why? Well, because no real standards were ever set. Take supervisory organizations, for an example. No set naming standards. Some regions use capital letters, some don't. Inconsistent usage of fields like the reference ID, or managers managing multiple supervisory organizations. All these examples are things that we often see. And in isolation, albeit they're small, but together they add to that chaos. And what do they impact? Well, they impact things like reporting, they impact integrations, and they even impact downstream systems. As organizations evolve and grow, so does your Workday tenant. And that lack of control turns into growth without guardrails. Take calculated fields, for example, that may get layered on top of each other to solve urgent one-off reporting issues, or integrations that are built to work around the data problem rather than being fixed at source. Another example is position management. Are you as an organization using and reusing positions as efficiently as you possibly can? Are you creating unnecessary positions to ensure that someone is hired to backfill in time instead of using delivered functionality like the job overlap function? What does that result in well, you can't do headcount reporting, or your headcount reporting is inaccurate. And then you can't look to then leverage and utilize things like succession planning. What else adds to that data chaos? Well, let's look at some more examples. Open positions and empty supervisory organizations that haven't been filled, for months or even years. Trust me, we've seen it. Take compensation plans and grades, for example. Are they automatically defaulting in from the point that you create your requisition or at the point of the hire? If they're not, these are the type of things that lead to data inaccuracies, because now we're relying on a user selecting a compensation grade profile or a compensation plan rather than that value defaulting in from, say, an eligibility rule. And what's the ultimate cost? Well, we refer to it as a hidden or a daily tax, where now users, they don't trust reports in Workday. Every Workday release requires heavy regression testing twice a year. Your audit processes become painful, and there's that constant manual checking just to be confident that that data is right, especially when we get to some of the cyclical processes that you run on an annual basis. Take your performance process or your annual compensation processes. So guys, hopefully that's given you a flavor of what sort of causes some of those data issues in the examples that we've given. We are going to pause now, and I'll hand over to my colleague Louise, who's going to take us through a quick poll.
Fabulous. Thank you, Alti. So Alti really set the scene for some of the things that we see when we're talking to you about your data and when you're experiencing some of those frustrations. And we'd really be quite keen to see what your response is to that and where you think your biggest data risk sits today. So we would like to invite you to scan our little Mentimeter code using your smartphone, if you have that handy, or if you don't, if you want to go to menti.com and type in that code that you can see on the screen. And we're actually just going to give you an opportunity to tell us where you see your biggest data risk today.
I'll stop sharing and I'll move over for us to look at some of the results, Louise.
So we're going to give it just another couple of minutes to let people come in and put in their responses. We know we have quite a few participants on the call, but this is very interesting to see The quality and consistency, as well as governance and ownership, are currently kind of flagging there as the highest items. That was very interesting, and it's not a story that is uncommon to us, and it is something that we typically tend to find a lot of the time that we're having a look at data or when we're faced with data challenges. So it's all been well to know that you are facing data challenges, and as much as we'd like to believe that we're also very different, actually some of the things we experience are the same. So what are we going to do about it, and how are we going to address it? What's the actual solution to the problem? So from a virtual resource perspective, we really honestly have a three-step process. It's really three very simple steps, and we're going to talk about that today. But just before I start, I want to just introduce myself. My name is Louise, and at VR, I'm fortunate enough to have a role where I really get to see change happen. I'm part of our transformation team that Alti spoke about a bit earlier, and we really are that bridge between what happens today and what needs to happen tomorrow. But we're also the bridge between business and technology, and we focus a lot in the process space. And I've really learned in my experience that when you are clear on what your business processes are, you uncover what your data needs are. And clean, trusted data does not happen by accident. The solution is not complex. It's a three-step solution, but it is detailed, and it is the result of very clearly defined standards, disciplined execution, and then controls that hold over time. And these three steps are very much what we are going to speak to you today about. So let's start off with step number one, defining the standard and how you go about doing that. So it's easy to say define a standard, but what does that actually mean, and how do we get there? Too often we see people jump straight into fixing data without first agreeing what good actually looks like or how it will be sustained. What we see is that during projects, the focus is often on technical delivery, getting the system built, getting to go live, and in many cases delivering some reports and dashboards, but of course not everything. And it's exciting. It's exciting to see your system come to life, and everybody wants to be involved in it. And often at that point, data standards and data quality controls are not prioritized, and in some cases, they're not included at all. And when we talk about data standards, we come at it from two perspectives. Either you're working with an existing system where data already exists and the issues may have been identified, or you're starting with a new implementation where standards are being defined upfront. Sometimes data issues only surface later, and this is what Alti referred to as the hidden tax. Once data is already in the system and you have your process controls in place and your validation rules have been configured, it's a whole lot harder to go back and to change something. But regardless of whether it's an existing environment or a greenfield implementation, the desired outcome is the same, a single version of what right looks like. So when we talk about what right looks like, that's where your business processes are important. You're clearly defining who does what, when, where, and how, and mapping out those to-be processes, which will then inform what data is needed. Now, I would love to show you what some of these look like, but they are very bespoke to our client needs. However, help is at hand, and Alti's going to talk to that a little bit later. So now you have you've got your business processes, you've got all of that defined. But another key component which often goes missing is to make sure that you have sign-off from your stakeholders. Make sure you have buy-in from your HR teams that are going to be managing this data going forward, but also make sure you have engaged and aligned with your finance team. Key components in Workday like cost centers, position management, and supervisory organization all have very strong ties to budget and financial management. The more aligned they are, the less debate on the numbers and the more trust in the system. Now, we recognize that in reality, some data issues only become visible once the system is live. And when more reporting needs surface or your data dashboards start being analyzed and decisions are being made. So really, our very strong recommendation is to address as much of your data quality and control framework as possible upfront, so that whatever emerges later, and things will emerge, but they are then the exception rather than the norm, and they can be adjusted and aligned much quicker. A key outcome of this first stage is a clear standard and ownership of your data. And once you have that data standard defined, now you need to move to a place where you're able to achieve that standard. And Alti, I'm going to hand back to you.
Thank you, Louise. So building on that framework that Louise just referred to, now we focus on that second stage, achieving the standard. And what we see is that this is where most organizations tend to struggle in practice. Traditionally, mass data validation ends up meaning spreadsheets or specific point-in-time extracts and a lot of manual effort. The problem is that it can be slow, it can be outdated almost immediately, and it's quite difficult to scale, right? So what we see work well at VR is build some of those mass data validation tools directly in Workday using various solutions, which can be tailored to the client's data and requirements. Meaning, your validations are real-time, configurable, and embedded in your tenant, not sitting in Excel, say, in somebody's desktop. Step 2 is about executing the data validation exercise with the target audience. This could be managers, this could be specific HR users, ensuring that the necessary support is then provided throughout that data validation activity. And finally, the third, we put automated standard checks in place. For instance, dashboards that show up and show where the data meets the standards and where the data doesn't, and where the risk is increasing. And those dashboards, they don't just disappear after go live, they become an ongoing data quality tool for HR and tech teams to use. The outcome and objective of this exercise is so you move away from sort of one-off cleanup exercises and towards something that's more repeatable, something that you can scale to keep your Workday tenant healthy. So once the standards are defined, the question then becomes, well, how do you actually get the data validated and corrected at scale without sort of creating more administration or administrative work? Well, here are 3 examples that we wanted to share with you of 3 different types of solutions that we've used depending on the organization, the requirements, the audience, as well as the type of data that's being validated. For employees or manager-driven updates, we use and would recommend Workday journeys, right? Journeys are great because they guide people through a targeted role-based actions. So they only see what they need to fix. It reduces central administration and it drives accountability to those that truly own the data without compromising on that user experience. Now, when managers need a broader view of their teams or something more custom, we've previously built a Workday Extend app or a custom Extend app. For this particular client, it provided them with a single place where they could review their key data points, allow managers to then make updates to their direct reports within that one screen rather than having to navigate multiple Workday tasks. For example, if the employee type is incorrect for a given employee, the manager would enter the correct value, they would save the change in the background, and then that would initiate or kick off a change job process that would then follow the relevant workflow that exists within your environment. Now, I mentioned at the start of the webinar that, here at VR, we try and be practical and very much delivery focused and try to adapt to our clients' needs. For one particular client who didn't have the SKUs or the licenses for Workday Journey, and they didn't have Workday Extend, we instead suggested to use Workday Worksheets for their mass data validation activity. Now, for some of you who may not be aware of what Workday Worksheets is, it's essentially Workday's equivalent to Microsoft Excel or Google's equivalent to Google Sheets equivalent for Google. So the worksheet runs off live Workday data. So when you refresh that data, the data dynamically updates. And it doesn't just stop there. There's other benefits, things like security, right? It follows Workday's security framework because the worksheet is within Workday, which means that it then reduces the risk of sharing data with users that shouldn't be able to see it. Now, we ran the worksheet solution for over 2,500 managers, and the client had over 95% success rate. So much so that the client will be using the same solution for the second year running. Now, key message here is that all of these solutions keep data ownership where it belongs, while still enforcing the same underlying standards that were set in stage one that Louise referred to. So what's next? Well, looking ahead, if you were at Rising, Workday Rising last year, you may have heard reference to Workday Data Cloud. Workday Data Cloud is a product suite designed to simplify how data flows between people and finance in and out of Workday within the ecosystem. It will remove things or the need for complex ETL processes, extract, transform, and load, and it provides secure bidirectional access to Workday data, meaning there's improved output of that data for analytics and for AI. It's currently available as early adopter with selected customers, and Workday continues to refine that capability before it makes it available to all customers. In addition to that, Incubane, who I mentioned earlier at the start, who are our sister company, is also working on an Extend app to detect, prioritize, and help fix data issues called Clean. Now, they'll be running a webinar sometime in March with Workday to talk through both of those topics and walk through real live use cases. And we'll share details around that webinar at the end of our session. Right, so as organizations start to explore AI in and around Workday, one thing that has become very clearly, very quickly, as mentioned at the start, is that AI models are only as good as the data that they consume. So to address that, we've built a structured AI data readiness assessment as one of our services that help customers and clients take a step back and assess how ready is their data actually for AI or for a specific AI tool. We start with data governance, looking at whether ownership and stewardship are clearly defined for critical data domains and data fields. We then assess the data completeness and consistency, particularly around worker data, organizational data, job and grade architecture, because AI models will likely surface or they'll amplify any gaps and inconsistencies quite quickly. The third is architecture and reporting readiness, whether the data model, reports, and integrations are structured in a way that they can realistically support your AI use cases. And finally, we look at process maturity. So how data is reviewed, approved, validated as part of your overall operations and change governance process. Now, what we provide is then an output with a clear readiness score, a maturity assessment, and a set of recommendations that help organizations understand where AI can be applied with confidence today and where further work may be needed. And we've got an example to show you in the next slide. So for instance, do you plan to utilize Career Hub and Skills Cloud? What about things like search insights or AI generated job descriptions on your job requisitions and so on? We will outline at the field level which fields are required, which fields are critical, and then we assess the accuracy of those fields in your tenant and then make a recommendation based on those findings. Right, so hope you found this useful. Now I will hand back over to Louise, who will take us through the third stage of that framework, maintaining the standard.
Thank you, Alti. So of our three-step, very simple process, you've set your standard, then you've set up your journeys, your Extend app, or your worksheet to clean your data, and you've gone through that process of cleaning your data. So it's time to celebrate. Yes, yes, it is. But your challenge now shifts from implementation to sustainability. How do you maintain that standard over time? So let's take a look at what we mean when we talk about data governance. Now, I recognize that this is a very busy slide, but it is intended to be a one-stop freebie from us to help you establish your data governance framework, and you're more than welcome to take a screenshot of it. We spoke earlier about defining the standard, and we've spoken about the tools you can use to achieve that standard. And this final step is about being able to maintain the standard. And even then, you need to be monitoring and managing it on an ongoing basis. This is not a once and done activity, I'm afraid. At its core, your effective data ownership is going to be built on clarity, on accountability, and on consistency. You need clear ownership of your data, clear rules for how data is created and maintained, and then consistent application and monitoring of those rules across the organization. It really is ultimately our three-step process. Now, the elements on this slide are intentionally designed as a framework and not a one-size-fits-all model. They represent the core building blocks that every organization should have, regardless of your size, your maturity, or your platform. Roles and ownership define who is accountable. Your standards and policies define what good looks like. Controls and validation ensure that issues are prevented or detected early. And then monitoring and reporting provide visibility so governance is proactive rather than reactive. Your challenge is that your governance needs to be embedded in your day-to-day operations and not run as a parallel activity or as a once-a-year type of activity. It must support the business, not slow it down, and it must be practical enough to be sustained. This framework gives you a starting point. It allows you to scale your governance over time and adapt it to your particular operating model. And you can mature it as your data and your reporting needs evolve. Our role is to help you tailor this framework, embed it in your processes, and ensure that the standards you define are not only achieved, but sustained. A key takeaway for me, and I've seen this on many occasions in projects that I have been part of, is that you can do everything right during a project, but governance truly comes to life in your production or business as usual space. So actively using your data is often where you see where the standards need to evolve. And this feedback loop is essential for sustained value and adoption. And talking about adoption, I'm going to hand over to Piotr, who's going to tell us a little bit about how we enable that data accuracy in Workday.
Hi everyone, my name is Piotr Gorzałek. I'm the Workday security lead at VR. Last 10 years I've spent in mainly Workday security and reporting. And let me walk you through how we enable data accuracy in Workday with dashboards. We use two key dashboards to work hand in hand to keep your Workday environment clean, reliable, and secure. First, we have the data quality dashboard. You can think of it as your data guardian. It continuously monitors the accuracy and consistency of Workday data. Whenever something looks off, maybe an outdated record, a missing field, or an inconsistent information, it flags it. It gives you or your HR and IT teams the visibility they need to quickly detect issues, improve data quality, and ensure you remain compliant. What is interesting here is that you can also incorporate data from other sources than Workday via Prism. Second, we have the security audit dashboard. This is essentially your security detective. It provides a unified, comprehensive view of all Workday security aspects across the tenant. It helps you to see how security groups, permissions, and accesses are configured. With this insight, you can proactively tighten security controls and maintain a strong, compliant security posture. Together, these dashboards help you protect both the quality of your data and the security of your system, ensuring Workday remains a trustworthy and well-managed platform.
Thank you, Piotr, and thanks for sharing those great examples. So as promised, we've got another poll for you. Okay, so if you could please grab your phones or go to menti.com and either scan the QR code that's on the screen or enter the code. But what we'd like to do is, which of these components of that framework and the 3 stages that we've spoken to that you would benefit from? And would love to see some of your responses on that. All right, so a mix between defining the standards and maintaining. Well, maintaining the standard trumps it. Okay, that's great. Thank you guys for voting. I will jump back to our slide deck because we did make mention of this a couple of times throughout the webinar today, but we are offering a limited number of free advisory consultant power hours. And what are they? Well, it's a flexible way and a high impact way for you to get direct access to our senior Workday HCM or data experts. And all you need to do is, again, either take a picture of this QR code or scan it, complete a form with 3 or 4 questions and details around your email, your name, and it asks you to outline what sort of challenges you're facing today. Once you submit that form, we will then work with you to set up a focus session that suits yourselves with the right consultant to help with that specific challenge that you've described and to help you overcome some of those issues or challenges that you're facing today. And just to highlight, they are free, but they are limited. So please go ahead and complete those forms straight after the webinar. Right, so I think we are over to the Q&A slide. So Celise, I'm not sure if we have any questions or have you, no questions so far? Okay, all right. So maybe we'll, thank you, Celise. So I think we'll continue ahead where before we close off, we wanted just to kind of summarize or highlight the top tips that we want to give you, the key takeaways from this webinar that we've taken you through. And they are that always start with your standards and not just your data validation tools, right? So be explicit about what good looks like before you try and fix or automate anything in Workday. The second is, fix data issues at scale to get a strong baseline, but always fix them at source, because if you don't, what tends to happen is 6 months down the line or a year down the line, those same issues will start to reappear again. As well as that, when designing your data validation tool, think reoccurring. You want to ensure that you create these solutions and these tools in Workday that are repeatable validations that you can then use for annual validation processes or biannual, whatever frequency. And the last and the third, and most importantly, is embed data quality into everyday work. So when it becomes part of how teams operate, not a one-off project, and that's when Workday data really starts to deliver that value. So as promised, here are the next 2 upcoming webinars that we've got in the next few weeks. So understand how AI is elevating the talent lifecycle. That's planned, and we'll be hosting that on the 11th of February. Please feel free to take a picture of this slide or scan the QR code to register. And the second, which I also made reference to, is introducing Data Cloud or Workday Data Cloud and the Clean Extend app by Incubane. So feel free to scan the QR code or take a picture. It'll be great to see you there. Last but not least, I think before we close off is here are our contact details should you wish to get in touch with us. Also, if you found this webinar useful, then please follow us on LinkedIn so you can receive more important information or any future webinars that we've got planned, because we've got lots planned. We've got the Workday 2026 R1 release. That's going to be due in the next few weeks, and we'll be sharing lots of information around some of the key changes or features that are being released in that space. All right. And with that, I think myself and my co-presenters just want to say a big thank you to everybody.
Just a second, Olti, sorry.
Yes.
There is an ask if we can go back for a second to the QRs for upcoming webinars from
Yes,
from
of
the
course.
audience. So if you could.
I did. Yes, thank you, Piotr. So I will leave them on screen, but again, reiterate, say a big thank you to everybody that joined. We hope you found this webinar useful and hope to see you again. And I think hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to take a picture of those QR codes. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Hope you have a great day, and we'll give you 20 minutes back. Thank you and speak to you soon.